The room was too quiet for a warship. General Threx of the Zorthan Dominion stood at the center of the command deck, his 6 eyes scanning the delegation before him. The air buzzed with the faint hum of life support systems and the tension of 5 species trying to act like they weren't sizing each other up. A human stood among them. Not in a decorated uniform, not adorned with medals or ceremonial patches, just a plain green combat jacket, sleeves rolled to the elbows, and a face that looked like it had been carved out of stubbornness and asphalt. His name was Kieran Osley. He was the only one not sweating or, in the case of the Jelari, secreting a similar form of stress mucus. His arms were folded, one boot tapping the metal floor softly. Threx took a step forward, his voice low and deliberate. How long can a human fight? The question wasn't rhetorical. The Zorthans were preparing for a joint counteroffensive against the Freylock incursions near the Epsilon Verge. They needed to understand their allies' limits. Tactical endurance was crucial. Biological constraints mattered. Kieran didn't blink. His voice was calm, even tired. Until it's over. Silence fell like a dropped tool. Threx didn't respond right away, neither did the others. The room just paused. Even the automated system seemed to hesitate. Commander Vila of the Jelari blinked twice and muttered, "Clarify your parameters." Kieran didn't move. "You asked how long we fight. That's the answer." "You mean until death?" Threx pressed. Kieran let out a shallow breath. "Not necessarily. Could be until the mission's done. Could be until we get pulled out. Could be until we collapse." "But if you're asking how long before we quit, we don't." Threx tilted his head slightly. "Even if wounded, especially if wounded." The general stepped forward. "That's either a lie or foolish bravado." Kieran looked up at him, eyes steady. "You'll find out soon enough," and they did. 3 standard weeks later, the joint force landed on Freylock 7, a jagged, sulfurous world with winds like razors and gravity, just strong enough to make every step feel like dragging a sled uphill. The Zorthans led the frontal assault on Sector Varn, while the humans, supported by Jelari scouts, were dispatched to secure the outlying comms towers. Kieran was assigned as field leader of Echo Unit 13 soldiers, all human, all volunteers. The drop was rough. Their carrier scraped a mountainside on descent, and one of the Jelari pilots blacked out from the turbulence. Kieran had to kick open the side hatch and drag him out before the craft slid into a ravine. They were on the ground, scattered and disoriented. The air was barely breathable even with filters. Kieran's boots hit the rocky soil and his radio sputtered. "Echo Unit, check in. Echo 2 here, I'm good. Echo 5 minor leg injury, setting up a triage point. Echo 7 visual on the tower." "It's heavily guarded." Kieran adjusted his shoulder strap, then pulled a small tablet from his jacket. The map flickered, showing red markers everywhere. "Freylock patrols are denser than we thought. We move quick, we move quiet." Their approach began with a crawl, literally. The terrain was jagged, the sulfur in the air burned their lungs, and the enemy had movement sensors scattered like breadcrumbs. Kieran led from the front, crawling through sharp shale and ducking under sensor webs. By the time they reached the base of the comms tower, Echo 5's leg was shaking. The wound had worsened. Kieran gestured for cover. "Sit him down, get the field kit." Echo 11 pulled the med pack and began cleaning the wound. It was a deep gash, clotting poorly. "Cuts clean but deep. He won't be walking in 20 minutes. "We don't need him walking," Kieran said. "We need him watching our 6. Set him up with the sniper kit." The Freylock patrols began circling. Their armor shimmered like molten glass and they moved with twitchy, insect-like speed. Kieran signaled, then ran low along the cliff wall. He climbed the last 30 feet to the tower's base, fingers bleeding from the rock. He planted the charge under the east support strut and slid back down just as the patrol turned the corner. Bullets sparked around him. He hit the dirt and rolled behind a boulder. His shoulder screamed it had dislocated mid-fall. He gritted his teeth and shoved his back against the stone. "Echo 2, suppressing fire on my mark. Ready," he breathed once, then shouted. Now the hillside lit up. Echo 2 and Echo 3 opened up with pulse rifles, forcing the patrol back. Kieran stood and sprinted, right arm limp at his side. He reached Echo 5 and dropped. Pull. Echo 11 hesitated. Sir, I'm not. Pull the damn arm. With a sickening pop, the joint snapped back into place. Kieran gasped, then reached for his rifle. Charge is armed. We moved to fallback. They retreated up the ridge, dragging Echo 5 on a makeshift sled made from a broken panel. The tower exploded behind them, lighting the sky green. 2 more towers followed, 2 more battles, 2 more injuries. By the end of day 3, Kieran had cracked 2 ribs and taken a fragment to his thigh. He wrapped it, sterilized it, and kept moving. By day 5, they reached the primary relay. Reinforcements were supposed to meet them there. They didn't. Freylocks intercepted the other team, Echo 2 reported. No survivors. Kieran looked at the hill. The relay was fortified, 3 bunkers, autocannons, and at least 20 Freylocks. We hold here, set ambush points, we're digging in. Echo 10 stared at him. We're down to 9 people. We've got 2 functional rifles and barely any ammo. Kieran didn't raise his voice. Then we'll use rocks. The ambush worked. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but enough. They used sound decoys, collapsing tunnels, and a trick with thermal grenades that turned a whole squad of Freylocks into ash. Kieran got caught in the blast radius of one. His left hand burned badly, skin sloughing off in sheets by nightfall. Echo 8 tried to wrap his hand. You need a vac. You're not going to hold a rifle like that. I'll shoot right-handed, Kieran said. Sir, you're also limping and probably concussed, Kieran snapped, and we're still breathing. That's what matters. By the time the backup arrived, Zorthan shuttles screaming overhead with heavy weapons and med teams. Kieran was barely standing. His uniform was tattered, skin caked with blood and ash. His right eye was swollen shut. Threx stepped out of the lead shuttle and surveyed the carnage. You're still alive, he said. Kieran nodded once. You held the relay? Until it was over. Threx looked at the remaining Echo soldiers. Of the original 13, only 6 were still upright, 3 were unconscious in stretchers, 4 had died. You could have retreated, Threx said. We weren't told to. Threx studied him for a long moment, then gestured to the med team. Treat him first. Kieran didn't protest. He sat down hard on a supply crate and let the medic cut away his jacket. Broken ribs, second-degree burns on the hand, thigh injuries infected, and there's swelling on the side of his head, the medic muttered. He shouldn't even be conscious. Kieran coughed. I'm not thrilled about it either. Threx turned to his second in command. Log this. Human endurance exceeds projections, and next time we assign them to a mission, double the medical support. He turned back to Kieran. You said humans fight until it's over. Kieran looked up at him, bleary-eyed. We do. The general nodded once. Then you're not soldiers. You're storms. Kieran exhaled slowly as the medic began applying burn gel to his hand. His fingers twitched involuntarily. One of the younger Jalari soldiers stepped closer, clearly curious. Why? Why do you keep fighting? Why not stop when you're hurt? Kieran glanced at him, voice low. Because if we stop, someone else has to finish it, and maybe they're not ready. The Jalari nodded, backing away. Kieran leaned back against the crate, staring at the burned sky. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. The war moved on. The relay held. And Echo Unit's name was etched into the wall of the Joint Command's Hall of Endurance. A single phrase beneath it, until it's over. The med bay on the Zorthan flagship was not built with humans in mind. The lighting pulsed in a gentle violet hue that made Kieran's head pound harder, and the air smelled like disinfected kelp. He lay on a gurney that kept adjusting itself every few minutes, trying to align with his optimal spinal pliancy, which was a phrase the attending Gorth medic had repeated 3 times before giving up on explaining it. A translucent curtain buzzed faintly as it sealed him inside a pod marked Non-Zorthan Trauma Case 7. It was barely wide enough for his shoulders. He shifted, winced, then stopped trying. You are resisting the muscle relaxant, said the Gorth, who had returned with a set of curved instruments that looked more like musical instruments than medical tools. I'm not resisting, it's just not working. Impossible. Dosage calibrated for triple your body mass. Sedative concentration rated for Thul-class predators. Well, I'm not a predator, Kieran muttered. I'm Irish. The Gorth paused, blinking its vertical eye. That is not a species. Tell that to my liver. A huffing sound escaped the Gorth's spiracle, not quite laughter, possibly confusion. It tapped a pad, and a stream of blue symbols shimmered across the curtain. You have 4 cracked ribs, a thigh infection nearing systemic spread, moderate cranial swelling, and a first-degree hand burn that has not received proper dermal regeneration. We were busy, fighting. The Gorth stared at him for a moment longer, then turned to retrieve a dermal regenerator. He heard the door hiss open. Threx entered, still in partial armor, though the plating on his arms had been removed. Kieran could see a faint network of greenish veins running beneath the general's skin, twitching slightly with each movement. Your report was detailed, Threx said. Didn't have time to pad the ending. You omitted 33 minutes of the engagement at Relay 2. Must have slipped my mind, wasn't my best half hour. You lost consciousness? No. Just didn't like what happened. Threx stepped closer, eyeing the burn on Kieran's hand as the Gorth began applying a thick paste that smelled like rust and citrus. You dislocated your shoulder, took shrapnel, and refused immediate analgesics. Meds make me slow. You fought with your dominant arm non-functional. It was temporary. Threx tilted his head, antennae twitching. You should not be alive. Yeah, I've heard that a lot lately. The Gorth buzzed again, this time in annoyance. Patient is advised not to speak. Movement increases internal tearing. Got it, Kieran said, and then turned back to Threx. You need something? There is a council briefing in 6 hours. You are expected. I'm not wearing that ceremonial jacket again. You will wear clean clothing that is not soaked in congealed plasma. Compromise. Threx narrowed his eyes. You said humans fight until it's over. I need to know what over looks like. Does it mean death, victory, orders? Kieran closed his eyes for a moment. It means we stop when we've done what we came to do, and if we can't, then we keep going until someone else can. That is not a strategy. It's not meant to be. It's just how we're built. The Gorth adjusted the gurney's incline, bringing Kieran upright slowly. His ribs protested, his thigh throbbed, and the nausea came in a slow wave that he swallowed down. This is inefficient, the Gorth said flatly. Human biology is inferior under duress. Kieran gave a lopsided grin. You say that like it's a disadvantage. It is. Then why are we still here? The medbay door opened again, and this time a smaller figure stepped inside. It was Jalari, wearing a translator medallion and a set of ceremonial ribbons that meant something important to someone, somewhere. You are the one called Osley, the Jalari said. I saw you fight. Kieran looked up. You and a lot of others. No, I saw you when the relay collapsed. My unit was on the ridge. You ran into the dust cloud. There was someone screaming. There was also a live energy coil discharging. Your helmet was off. Couldn't hear otherwise. You dragged a Freylock scout out with you. Yeah, couldn't tell what it was in the smoke. Thought it was one of ours. You carried it one arm down a slope with active mines. Well, Kieran said, voice dry, I wasn't going to go uphill. The Jalari tilted its head, a slow blink passing across its wide eyes. Why save an enemy? I didn't know it was an enemy until afterward. And then, I let it go. Threx stepped forward. You what? It was bleeding out and scared, didn't even try to fight, just sat there watching me. So I opened the hatch and pointed east. Threx made a low sound deep in his throat. That was not protocol. It wasn't a threat. It was responsible for the deaths of at least 4 of your squad. Kieran's voice didn't change, still wasn't a threat. The Jalari turned to Threx. Permission to document this interaction for civic records. Denied, Threx said. This isn't a fable. Kieran leaned back against the gurney's headrest. Could have fooled me. The Gorth waved a scanner over his thigh. Infection reduced by 20%. Antibiotics will complete the cycle. You are forbidden from walking for 12 hours. Define walking, ambulating bipedally. What if I limp? Threx turned to the Gorth. Sedate him. Kieran raised a hand. I'm joking. You are not, the Gorth said. I'm trying to be. Threx crossed his arms, his armor creaking. You'll attend the briefing. You will not collapse during it. You will not bleed on the floor. I'll do my best. You will not downplay the significance of what you did. Kieran looked at him, tired but steady. What I did was survive. No, you demonstrated something we cannot replicate. And I need the council to understand that. Good luck. They don't listen to me. They will, Threx said, if they want to win. The Jellari lingered a moment longer, then turned toward the door. You gave a mercy, it said, even when pain and logic said otherwise. Wasn't mercy, Kieran said. It was instinct. The Jellari left. The Gorth tapped the scanner again. You may be ambulatory in 10 hours. Do not attempt sooner, no promises. I will inject a tracker. Really? No, but I am considering it. Kieran closed his eyes again. 6 hours later, he stood in the council chamber. He wore clean fatigues, borrowed boots, and a stiff collar that made his neck itch. His thigh was wrapped so tightly it felt like a tourniquet, and his ribs were taped beneath 2 layers of synthetic fiber. The burn on his hand was sealed, though the skin still looked like melted wax. The chamber was wide, with tiered seating and a circular floor. Every species in the coalition had a representative. Most looked down at him with clinical interest, others with open skepticism. Threx stood beside him, silent. The Jellari ambassador rose first. Human Osley, you were not bred for this war. Your biology is fragile. Your weapons are outdated. Your tactics are erratic. Yet you succeeded in a mission that cost 6 times your number in other species' casualties last cycle. Kieran didn't respond immediately. The ambassador continued. Why? He looked up at them, eyes ringed dark from lack of sleep. Because we don't stop. You've got soldiers who follow orders, warriors who seek glory, tacticians who calculate odds. He paused, flexing his stiff fingers. We carry each other. That's the difference. It's not about a win. It's about not leaving anyone behind, not giving up on the job, not letting the worst thing be the last thing. The chamber was still. A Zorthan delegate leaned forward. That sounds like madness. A lot of people think so, and yet you survived. Barely. But you would do it again, of course, even knowing the pain, especially because of it. Threx took a step forward. Let the record show, the human concept of endurance does not align with our models. It is not based on physical superiority, it is will. Another voice from the upper tier. That is not sustainable. Kieran looked up. You're right, it's not. That's why we train more. And when we can't go any further, someone else picks it up. The chamber sat in silence long enough for the lights to dim slightly. Then the Jellari ambassador nodded once. We will revise our projections. Kieran exhaled through his nose. Outside the chamber, he leaned against a wall and let the ache roll through him. Threx joined him. You didn't collapse. I'm surprised. I didn't bleed either, technically. We may need you again. Then I'll go. You should rest. Kieran looked down the hallway. Yeah. Eventually. The relay installation still hissed when it rained. Kieran Osley stood under the angled overhang of a maintenance outbuilding, watching sulfur-tinged drizzle sizzle off the scorched metal. The platform had been rebuilt in under a month, thanks to Zorthan engineers and 3 Jellari logistics crews who worked in eerie silence, like they were afraid the ground might remember them. It was late, or what passed for late Freylock 7 didn't have a proper night. The sky just dulled to a moody amber and the wind took on a colder bite. Kieran adjusted the sling across his shoulder and exhaled slowly through his nose. His left hand, still wrapped in fresh synth skin, ached when the weather turned. Behind him, the door let out a chime and boots tapped the floor too light for Threx, too deliberate for a Jellari. You're out of bed. I'm vertical, said Kieran. It's an improvement. You're not cleared for vertical, didn't ask. A Hadron officer stepped into view. She was tall, with a translucent hood framing her face like a jellyfish, the edges pulsing faint lavender. Kieran had seen her once at the briefing, but this was the first time she'd approached him directly. "You're Osley. Depends who's asking." "I'm Commander Serene. I've read the medical logs. You had internal bleeding for 2 days before the fracture was stabilized. You ignored 2 infection flags. You forced a shoulder back into place without sterile protocol. My options were limited. You made more injuries than you prevented. Only ones I could afford." Serene tilted her head slightly. "You humans all improvise like this, when we have to." She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "The way your body handled the injuries it shouldn't have held together. The med systems flagged your cortisol levels as lethal, twice." Kieran didn't look at her. "Guess I'm a slow quitter. I'm not here to compliment you." "I didn't think you were." There was a pause. Serene's voice dropped slightly. "You jeopardized your entire unit by refusing treatment." He turned to face her fully. They were still standing when a vac showed up. 3 of them might not walk again. They're alive. You think that justifies reckless decisions? I think someone had to make them." Serene didn't answer. Rain tapped the roof in uneven patterns, like something trying to form a rhythm and giving up halfway. Eventually, she stepped back. "You're being rotated out. I figured. Not for punishment. I didn't assume." She studied him for a second. "You're being reassigned to the Saro outpost. It's a cold world, mostly wind, no atmosphere worth breathing, but it's quiet. A recovery post, you'll have a team but no combat." Kieran nodded once. "All right. You're accepting this. I'm not trying to be a martyr, I'm just tired." Serene folded her arms. "Threx fought to keep you on active rotation." "Of course he did. He said you were irreplaceable. That's not true. There are others, not like you. There shouldn't be." Serene didn't argue. From inside the building, a low harmonic buzz rose. Shift change. That meant the Jalari scout teams were coming in, and the repair crews would start swapping out the tower's inner filters. Kieran leaned back against the wall and closed his eyes for a moment. "You've got a few hours before the transport arrives," said Serene. "You should eat before you pass out. I had soup." "That was more than 8 hours ago. I forgot." She turned to leave, then hesitated. "Do you regret any of it?" "Which part?" "Staying when you could have pulled back." Kieran opened his eyes again. "No. But I wouldn't do it the same way again." Serene nodded once, then disappeared back through the door. The wind picked up. Kieran's sling tugged at his shoulder and his ribs gave a dull complaint. He stayed outside anyway. The sulfur smell was worse indoors. By the time he made it back to the mess hall, it was mostly empty. A few Jalari sat clustered near the vents, trading filtered water packets and avoiding eye contact. Kieran limped to the dispenser, poured something that claimed to be broth, and sat at the far table. His utensils clicked against the bowl. He ate slowly, chewing with care. His jaw had taken a knock during the relay breach, and sometimes it clicked when he yawned. A small figure approached. Not a soldier too young, too wide-eyed. It was Jalari, but smaller than the others. It carried a sealed case in both hands, ornate and clearly ceremonial. "You are the one who held the ridge," Kieran set his spoon down. "Yeah. I was asked to give you this from my elder brother." "Who's your elder brother?" He was Echo 9. Kieran blinked. The name hit like a sudden drop in air pressure. "I didn't know he had family here." He asked them not to contact him until he completed his duty. He said he didn't want to be distracted. The Jalari set the case on the table. He left a message inside. Kieran didn't move for a moment. Then he reached out, fingers stiff, and opened the case. Inside was a cloth dark red with a single diagonal slash of pale thread. "That's a Jalari mourning shroud," the child said, "but he said you should keep it because you let him choose how he died." Kieran closed the case slowly. "Thank you," the child lingered. "He said humans don't leave anyone behind, but you left him." "I didn't have a choice." "I know. He said you shouldn't blame yourself." Kieran looked away. "He was a good soldier. He said you were the best leader he had." The child left without another word. Later, just before departure, Kieran stood beside the transport ramp as supplies were loaded. He held the case under one arm and watched the crew work. The Jalari engineers moved with quiet efficiency, while a Hadron logistics officer barked numbers in 3 languages. A Zorthan pilot checked fuel lines with a device that clicked like a metronome. Threx appeared at his side, arms crossed. "You're really going? They're not giving me a choice. I could override the order. You could, but you won't." Threx said nothing for a while. "You were right," he finally said. "It's not about strength, it's about refusal. It's about knowing what you'll carry and what you won't." Threx nodded once. "Your replacement arrives tomorrow." "She's human. Good. I don't like her. Then she'll probably be excellent." Threx's mouth twitched, not a smile, but not far from it. "You should rest." Kieran looked at the open ramp. "I will." "Will you come back?" Kieran hesitated. "If I'm needed, you will be." He stepped onto the transport without looking back. The doors closed. The ship rose. Threx stood there until the sound was gone. Then he turned, walked back toward the command post, and added a single line to the daily log. "Human endurance remains unquantifiable. Recommend observation protocols be updated to include moral calculus and irrational loyalty patterns. Additional note, they do not fight because they are told. They fight because someone has to."